Well, it looks like we have a problem here. Ha, that's it. GameplayKit surviving zombies with AI. All right, the truth is, that's the session I wanted to do, but Ray told me I couldn't have zombies in this session because I'm too much of a zombie lover. So, back to game AI with GameplayKit. So when we all die in the apocalypse, it's his fault, okay? Just remember that. All right, so what is GameplayKit? Well, GameplayKit is this exciting new, it's not so new anymore, framework from Apple that allows us game developers access to a core set of tools. Those core sets of tools include randomization, state machines, entities and components, there's a lot here, the min-max strategist, pathfinding, the rule systems, and agents, goals, and behaviors. That's a lot of stuff. And we definitely will not have time to cover all of that in this session. So we will focus on randomization and the min-max strategist. That's plenty, trust me. So what I like about GameplayKit is that it's independent, kind of like me. No, not really. I'm not at all independent. So what does that mean exactly? Well, that means that it runs on SpriteKit, it runs on SceneKit, and it also runs on Metal. It also runs on UIKit and AppKit. The trouble is I couldn't find fancy little icons for those, so you'll kind of have to use your imagination. The good news is I did find a fancy icon for OpenGL, which it also works with. So this is why I love GameplayKit. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it will work. So let me show you what we're going to be building here today. This is a game called Connections. You've probably seen it. You know, it's Connect 4. You basically have to get your color in 4 in a row, either horizontal, up and down, left and right, whatever, before the other guy does. As you can imagine, you're a developer. You don't like to leave your house. You don't have a lot of friends because you don't like to leave your house. So the game would get very boring if you had to play it by yourself. And this is why we need AI. We need to be able to play with something when we have no friends, like me. So I went out and I created an AI, and I'm going to share that with you. Now, because we have a limited amount of time, what I have decided to do is, first of all, if anyone knows me, I love SpriteKit. It is my favorite framework of all the frameworks in Apple. I didn't have time to teach you SpriteKit and GameplayKit, so this game is actually created using UIKit, and it kind of shows as a nice exercise that you can use GameplayKit with all these different frameworks. So let's take a look at our key components when we're working with the AI. Now the projects that you have, and I'll show you how to open them up. I created starter projects for you. Everything is there. You can play a game by yourself as both parts, okay? We're just going to go back and add the AI. So what is the AI for that? Let me take a break here. I actually have asthma, so if you hear that heavy breathing, that's mostly because I can't get air, so I'm sorry, just deal with it. So anyway, so what are the key components of GameplayKit and AI? Well, in a turn-based game, we have 3 things. We have the players, we have the board, and we have the moves and the turns. Now, GameplayKit makes this very easy for us. They kind of have it matched up nicely. For the players, we've got the GK Game Model Player. For the board, we have the GK Game Model. And for the turns, we have the GK Game Model Update. So you can see that there's a nice comparison there, 1-to-1. So let's break those down a little bit. Let's take a look at the actual classes that we just mentioned behind that. The first one is the GK Game Model Player. Now, in Demo 1, we'll only be working with the player and the board. We'll move on to other things in Demo 2. So we've got the GK Game Model Player, and we've got the GK Game Model. If I'm going too fast, it's mostly because I'm trying to get air. All right, so what do we need when we're working with the GK Game Model Player? First, we need the player ID. This is a required property for that class. What this does is it allows you to distinguish one player from the next. You don't have to worry about that too much. You just know that it needs to be there in your class. The next thing you have is the GK Game Model. This represents the board. For that, your required variables are players, which are all the players in the game. And then you've got your active player, which is your current active player on that board. You also have a few functions that you need to put into play. Those are apply, set game model, and game model updates. Now, what do these do? Well, there's something that you have to understand when you're working with game AI and the board. The idea here is that the game AI will go out, evaluate the board, figure out the best move possible based on some things I will tell you about later, and then we'll return the moves to the AI, and the AI will determine which best move should I make. Well, you can imagine that if you were to take these moves and play them on your current board, that could get a little messy. So what you need to do is create a copy of your board for every time it evaluates a move. And you do that with the set game model. You will use the copy with function to create a copy of your primary game model. So if I'm the primary game model and I want my AI to evaluate the moves that it can make, I will say, make me a copy of the board for the move you want to evaluate. Now I'm a copy. Then what I need to do is I set the game model with that copy, and I only copy the important properties in order to determine the best move. Because when you start working with the game AI and you start setting all these different settings, the processed moves can grow exponentially, which can slow down your game. And you don't want that. People will think it's not working. So now that you've made your copy, you've set the model, you do that game model updates. That's that next one there. Well, actually, it's the bottom one. That's the one that says, hey, go out, evaluate these moves, bring me back all the moves so I can figure out which move is the best move to make. Then you apply the moves, but you're still applying those on the copy, because then what happens, and we'll get into how it happens later, is it looks through everything and it says, hey, I have all these moves, I'm going to apply this move to this board, but now I need to see what my opponent might do. And then I need to try another move based on that. And you can see how these would grow and grow and grow and grow. And like my son's hair, it just grows and grows. It's terrible. He's a hippie. All right. So we're going to go on to demo 1. Now, you may have noticed that I was having a little trouble working out the screens here. So it might take me just a second to actually switch back over to demo mode. Let's see how this goes. Oh, hey, it worked. So exciting. All right, here we go. What I'm doing is okay, so following along is great. It helps us learn. But it's also easy to get lost when we're watching somebody type code. So I put a lot of thought into how I was setting this project up for you guys and girls. You've gotten your conference materials, and you've got these 3 folders. And we'll zoom in so you can see what I'm looking at here. You've got Demo 1, Demo 2, and the lab. We are going to start in Demo 1, which you guys should have. So if you go to the Demo 1 folder, inside the Starter folder, you'll see the Connections folder. I love nesting things. It's fantastic. But inside that, you'll be able to open up the project. When you get the project open, you'll have to expand all these things on the side to, let me tell you right now, you're basically only going to be working in board, move, player, and strategist. You will do a little bit of stuff in view controller. Everything else you don't have to worry about right now, but I strongly encourage you, when you have time, to go through and look how this, look through the project, see how it works. If you have any questions, come see me in the lab. That's going to happen during the next session. I also wanted it to be very easy to follow along. So what I'll do, now you can see that I've got, my screen is halved right now. Well, 3/4, I'm not great at math. This will not be the case through this whole demo. I just wanted to show you that on the left-hand side, I will refer to this as I go through each step. But when we actually get into the demo, this will take up the full screen, which I'm going to actually do right now. So you'll be able to see everything. One more thing, I hope it's one more thing that I want to mention about this project, is when you scroll down, in every one of these classes that we'll be working in, and we'll be working in the player.swift class first, you will notice that there's a things to do. Do not jump ahead or I will come hunt you down. Don't jump ahead. So when we go through these, the numbers that you see in the, it says demo 1 and then 1, 2, 3, they don't necessarily line up to the steps in the guide, which you also have. It's just the steps that we take in this particular class or in this file. So we'll go 1, 2, 3. We will do 3 things in here. I made it even easier because I'm lazy. In your jump bar, when we're ready to go to a step, if you click to number 1, for example, it will take you using to do right to where I need you to go. Hopefully everyone will stick along and we can get through this together. I will periodically ask you to raise your hand when you've caught up to what I'm doing. I just want to make sure that everybody stays on track. All right, so with that in mind, the first step we will be doing, I hope everyone has their project open, yes? Fantastic. Those of you who are just watching, that's fine too. Just raise your hand so I pretend to count you in on, yes, I'm following along. All right, so here we go. Step number 1. Oh no, it's not scrolling. All right, well, that's all right. Look, Murphy decided to show up. Let me just switch screens real quick and see if we can jumpstart that. By the way, the name of this program is Byword, and I would strongly recommend you get it. I'm just going to close those real quick because I think it's really important that we have those steps there. Someone wants to sing that Vanna White song? Thank you. All right, there we go. It's just you got to kickstart these things. They're computers. They're like, yeah, I'm going to screw it up. Why not? All right, so number 1. What we want to first do is add the GameplayKit player. That was the thing I talked about in the beginning. To do that, as I said, we're going to go to the player class. And what we need to do with that is we need to modify the player class by making it conform to the GK model player. Okay? And we'll do that by coming over here to our number 1 to do, and we will simply go like this. I should also warn you guys that I can't type very well, so I have issues with typing. Can you tell? That's it. The class now conforms to that. You're probably wondering, well, why is there an error already? That's because we didn't add the required player ID variable. Well, I'm not going to use the jump bar to go to step 2. I'm just going to go back over here so you can see what we're going to do, and that's add the player ID. So we will come here where we've got our to-do. We'll create, I call everything a variable, everything, whether it's a let or a variable. I should learn to call it properties, but I'm old school. Just so you guys know, variable is something you can change. Let is something that it's a constant. You cannot change that. Once you set it, that's what it is. So let's give our player ID. So we've got that. We're going to move on to the third thing that we have to do, and that's right here. We need to initialize the stone and set the player ID. Now the stones are the blacks and the reds. With that, I have a, if you look at it, there's this raw value that I'm pulling. You don't have to scroll up. I'm just going to do it real quick. But I'm using this stone color enum here to give me my IDs. So I'm going to come down here to my number 3, and I'm going to set that player ID using that raw value. That will give me black or red or none if there's no player. So we will type in self.playerID equals stone.raw value. So now we've set our player ID. We should no longer have our error. It disappears because we've now conformed to this protocol. So the next step we want to do is add the GameplayKit model, and to do that we need to modify the board class. So I want everyone to go over to the board Swift file and open that file up. I'm going to jump back real quick and just save my player Swift because I tend to need to save often. I have cats in my house, and if I don't save things, they step on my keyboard and blow things up. It's terrible. They're evil. All right, so we are in our board.swift. For this, we need it to modify to conform to the GK game model. So let's scroll down a little bit. And for that, kind of just like before, make sure this is up so you guys can see it. We're just going to do GK game model. Now, I've got the auto typing thing on. Just if you do too, just make sure you go to the game model. I've myself has accidentally chosen the wrong thing, and it's been terrible. You'll notice we also have an error for that. That's because we've got to add our required variables in order to conform to that protocol. And until we do that, we'll continue to have an error. So the first thing that we want to do is add the two variables, players and active player. Now, this is a really, really large class, and I will be using the jump bar a lot. If you get lost, there's line numbers. It should be, if you have to turn yours on, unfortunately, I don't have time to tell you how to turn that on, but use the jump bar. It'll really, really help. So for that, that's number 2, add variables, players, and active players. That'll take you right to where I want you to go in the code. So what we'll do is, this is a long one. Bear with me as I try and type it. It's var players. And for this, it needs to be GK game model player. You guys learned about the question mark last night. So there we go. Now for here, what I want to do is, in my player class, and this is again why I encourage you to look through the project that I gave you, I have a property called all players that basically returns the black and the red stone. So I simply just return that. So it's going to be return player dot all players. So now I've conformed so far. I have one more variable to add. I'll move this up so you all can see it. The next one I want to add, of course, is active players. So var, or active player, pardon me, active player, and that is also going to be a GK game model player. And in this case, that is going to return the player, return the current player. See, I can't type. So there we go. The errors will disappear. Maybe, maybe not. Return current player. Did I not do that right? Did I? See, this is why they shouldn't let me out. They really shouldn't. Oh, I shouldn't sniffle into the mic. How awful. Okay, there we go. So now we've got that. The next thing we need to do is, again, we have our variables in, we're conforming there, but we now have to add those functions that I mentioned. And basically, that's those 3 functions, the set game model, the apply, and the other one that I can't remember right now. But first, we will do the set game model. So using this, we'll go down to number 3. That's right next to it. See, I overuse those things. This one is also a lot of code that we'll have to type in, so please bear with me. For this, what we need to do now, if you're writing this from scratch, you wouldn't write it out this way. You would just do it right out of the gate. But again, to make the project compile and to use it easier in the class, it just made sense to do it this way. So when you update this, make sure you modify it by typing in exactly what I'm going to type in now. And that's going to be underscore game model. I'll try not to make any mistakes this time, but I'm only human, so that's cool. GK game model. I'll come inside the function now. I'm going to do if let board equals game model as board. And this is where I'm going to be setting some key components from my board. Yeah. Did I not do that? There we go. Thank you, by the way. So this is where I'm going to be setting key components for my board, and in this case I'm going to be setting the spots, which are basically the blank spots that I can drop the chips into, and those are going to come off of board spots. And then I am going to set my current player, and in this case my current player equals the board current player. So now that we've got our key components set for our board copy, we're going to, I believe we have to scroll up. This is where the copy width is set to. This is on line 126. Raise your hand if you're still with me. Oh, that's so cool. All right, so here the only reason we're getting an issue is because we need to pass in the board. So let's go ahead and pass in the board. And we're obviously already in the board model, so we can just type in self and that'll pass it in. So the next step, step number 3, is we have to conform the game models, we have to conform to the game models protocol and modify the board class some more. So let's do that. I gotta scroll. I got directions all around me. Let me just catch up to my own self here. There we go. Let me just check something real fast. Yeah, that's right. Feels like I skipped a step. All right, well, here we go. Oh, I see what I'm doing. You think I practiced this, right? All right, so the reason I thought I was jumping ahead is because we come back later and we do some more things with this function. I realize now what I did was if I don't add what I'm going to add now, we'll have an error. So that is why I did it. So basically the is-win, which I will show you some more about in demo 2, we have to add some things to it in order to use it. But for now, just play along. We're just going to say that the is-win is going to be for player, and it's going to be GK game model player. And that's it. That's all we have to do. And that's why it was a little confusing to me, because I had forgotten that step, even though I practiced last night. We're going to get an error right now because we need to add the return statement inside the function. Right now we've got return false. We should have return nil. And that's going to be on line 170. No, I lied. Leave that to false. Who wrote this? Jeez. The return nil is the next one. I should tell you guys, when I practiced this, I actually did have these steps on my left because I can't type. So line 192, we're going to do return nil, and the reason we need to do that is for the same reason we updated the other one. If we just come up to the game model updates, we also have to do the for player GK game model player, and then we're going to return the GK game model update. I'm just doing a build real quick to see where we're at. We've got a nil. We're good. And finally, number 7. To do, we need to modify our apply function. And the reason we have to do that is because we have to pass in our game model update. So game model update, and then for this we've got GK game model. Build and run. We are still failing. Let me see why we're failing. Because we have to go on to our next step, and that is in the view controller. And in the view controller, we're actually calling the update game. And right now, if you go over to view controller, and we'll find our step in here, which is step 1, to modify the call to board.isWin. Everybody there so far? This is where we're getting our error, and that's because we modified that isWin in our board class. And what we did is it's looking for us to pass in the current player. So we can type in for board.current player. Now we should be able to build. I lost my stride there. All right, so before we go into step 4, we're all good? All right, cool. I thought I might have lost you there because I lost myself, clearly. All right, so add the GameplayKit min-max strategist. Now we're only going to add him. We're not going to actually configure him. We just want to make sure that he's getting ready and he's going to be there for when we want to engage in the strategist. So for that, we're going to open the strategist.swift file. And we're going to go to number 1. For our strategist, we are just going to create a private property. See, I'm learning. This one will be a private property. So private let strategist. Every time I type that, I will say it just like that. And that is going to be let strategist. You thought I was kidding. Equals GK min max strategist. That is the one we will be using for this game. And then we're simply going to return the strategist. Y'all good? Perfect. Now we need to add the board variable. Do that down here. What I'm going to do is, I don't like that it's that low, so I'm just going to bring that up for you guys in the back so you can see it. Before we move on, I have a typo. That's a very shocking thing. Line 44, I actually have it incorrect. It's private let strategist colon. I forgot to actually tell it what it was. So that is what it should look like. Those compiler little error things are cool, aren't they? They point out when you make giant mistakes like that. See, and it's still... You'll all be happy to know that I made that mistake every time I ran through this. Every single time. It's good to know that I'm consistent in what I do, right? If nothing else, at least I'm consistent. All right, so the next thing we want to do now is we want to add the board variable and set the strategist for that board. So I should be okay with this one. Let me scroll it up a little bit. Var board is type board, and that is going to be did set, and this time we're going to type in strategist.gameModel equals board. You guys ready for the big reveal? Build and run. Go for it. Gotta wait for my simulator to come up. He's thinking, what am I supposed to do? Let's make this bigger for you guys. I'll go 75. So here's what we've done so far. Isn't that fun? So I'm still playing alone, and it seems like we haven't really done anything yet, but we actually have. We started to get our gameplay kit and our game AI added, despite a couple of typos and some missing parentheses and so on and so forth. So before I go on to the demo 2, well, actually the theory for demo 2, does anyone have any questions at all? Cool. Do you want to take a few minutes break before we move on? No? No? Okay, we're going to go on then. Those guys look ominous, don't they? All right, so we've got our game model added. We've got our player in. We've got our moves ready. Now we have to actually, and we have our strategist. We just haven't set the strategist up. So when we're looking at a strategist, in GameplayKit we have two. We have the GK Monte Carlo strategist, and we have the GK Min Max strategist. So that's great that we have two, but how do we know which one to choose, right? How do you know? Well, with the GK Monte Carlo strategist, which is the one we're not using for this particular demo, that strategist is probabilistic. I'll have you know I looked that up on Google to learn how to pronounce it, because I didn't know how to, probabilistic. Now I just like to say it. So it is also, the moves are not scored. Okay, so when it's figuring out what moves to make, it doesn't care. It's either win or lose, all right? Excuse me. It's either win or lose. Then we've got enhanced performance on this. So if you're looking for, wait a second. Yeah, that's right. Okay. You know, I really did practice this. I'm not going to look at this anymore. This is screwing me up. All right, so the GK Monte Carlo strategist is probabilistic. The moves are not scored. It only cares about winning or losing. And with that, you get the enhanced performance. But with enhanced performance, you get weaker gameplay, right? Because there's not a whole lot going on. It's just a little bit weaker, but hey, we don't care, win or lose. The GK Min Max strategist, on the other hand, he's deterministic. And deterministic, the moves are scored. He cares about, well, how much will I get if I make this move? How much will I get if I make that move? But when you're doing that, you do get enhanced gameplay, but you also get decreased performance, because it's got to think, all right, well, if I make this move, is it going to be less or more advantageous for me or my opponent? So when you're looking at the GK Monte Carlo strategist and the GK Min Max strategist, we talked about how one was probabilistic and one was deterministic. So what exactly does that mean? Well, probabilistic, there's a certain randomness that you need to contend with. You've got all these choices, and you're just going to kind of choose one at random, and that's what you're going to do. A deterministic strategy, you're really exhausting all of your possibilities. You're creating this exhaustive tree search, and you're going through everything, and you're really looking through and trying to figure out, is this my best move? So you can see that one of them will give you really cool play, like you're playing against a human, random choices, and it's speedy. And one will really go through everything exhaustively, but it's a little bit slower. So we talked about the strategist. We started to get the strategist set up. What exactly do we do once we get it ready? We need to create a random source. Now, when you create a random source, we're going to use GameplayKit to do that. It has that randomization in there. If you're doing a GK Min Max strategist, you don't have to set a random source. You're encouraged to set a random source. And the reason you're encouraged to do that is because it allows you to tweak some things. You're actually going to get to play with the random source in the lab. In the demo, we're not going to set the random source. It's going to just not be selected. If you're going to use the GK Monte Carlo strategist, you have to set a random source. If you do not set a random source on the GK Monte Carlo Strategist, your code will not compile. So when also you set the properties for this, there's this thing called the max look ahead depth. And in a game like Connections, if you look ahead 7 turns, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the game, right? Because you can see everything. If you look ahead 3 turns, and by look ahead, I mean like I'm going to take a turn, you're going to take a turn, I'm going to take a turn, you're going to take a turn, and the AI will look ahead that many turns. Now, the more you look ahead, the slower it will be returning moves. Okay, so keep that in mind. You also, there comes a point where, and Connections is a great example of this, I can set my max look ahead to 50. There's no advantage to it because the game only takes 7 moves to win if you play it really well. You also need to set your game model, right? That's important. That's going to be needed for the strategist. And you will also be using, the strategist is what calls the best move for active player. That's where it says, hey, check your models, give me the moves, let me figure out the best one. So that is something else you'll have to do on that. And speaking of moves, this is where I really can't help you out. In fact, when I was writing this course, I was like, well, what game should I use? Because games are so complex, and your rules for your game might be different than my rules for this game. But there are a few things that you have to set regardless of the rules of the game. You absolutely have to have a value in your game model for your move, or else it won't work. It's just a requirement. You have to have that is win, you know, the thing that tripped me up before? You have to have that. And what that says is, hey, look, is this move I'm going to make going to result in a win? That doesn't mean that a win or a non-win is a loss. Okay, it just means it's not a win, or it is a win. You have is loss, which is what you can use to determine if a move will result in a loss. And just because something is not a loss doesn't mean it is a win. So it's very important that you understand that distinction. A lot of people think, well, if it's not a loss, then it must be a win, and that's not true. And if it's not a win, it must be a loss. Well, that's not true. Could also be a draw, right? And that's where the score comes in, and we're going to be using the score here. The score allows you to use a heuristic, which is basically a way to, it's a rule of thumb, like if I make this move, it's generally better. Okay, and that's what we're going to make our AI use. We're going to make him use a score. Now, the thing about that is, in the demo, the score is very simple. Very, very simple. In the lab, you're actually going to mess around with that heuristic and make it a little more complex. So when you're thinking about your game and the moves and the players in this game and what they can do, consider that. Consider, do I want to use is win? Do I want to use is loss? Do I want to use the score to return to me the best moves to make? That is really dependent on your game. Now we're going to go off to demo 2. This one is not nearly as intense. So let's see what we've got to do for demo 2 here. So we have our strategist that we added. We need to actually add our strategist to the board. And we're going to be doing that in the view controller. So let's head over to the view controller. I'm going to use my jump bar here. I got to find the actual number 2, by the way. Type in strategist equals, that should be a capital S. I'm going back to fix it. We're going to pass in the board. So here we've set our strategist on our board using the strategist class that we created earlier, which is expecting a board for us to pass in. Now go down to the reset board function. What we want to do here is we want to make sure that when we go through our gameplay, we're doing a lot of modifying with, we've got names that says player 1 turn, player 2 turn. We're updating just a whole bunch of different things. And if there's a win or a loss, we're resetting the board. That's what this function is doing. And when we reset the board, it's worthy to note that you can actually have multiple strategists in your game. So keep that in mind too. You don't have to just have one strategist. But here we're going to just reset our strategist on this board. And we're just going to type in strategist.board equals board. Now we're ready to actually work on our move. So head over to the move.swift. Scroll down. And here we need to redefine this class to conform to this particular protocol. You guys are going to be experts at this. Just move that up so you can see it. Type in GK game model update, because remember, the game model update is the move. That is a very confusing concept in the beginning. Your game model update is the move. And if you remember, you need to have your required variable for your value. That's what determines the better move in a sense. That's how they order the moves. So just type in var value. And for now, we're just going to set that to be 0. So int equals 0. Not O, but 0. So we have, just to recap, everyone's caught up, right? Yeah. Just to recap, we've created our player. In our player class, we've created our move just now. We have created our board. We've got all of that set. The last thing that we need to do, well, it's not exactly the last thing, but around the last thing we need to do is make sure that we implement all this and say, hey, you know, everything is set up. Now it's the AI's turn. Go out and get my best move. So where are we going to do that? Well, we're going to go over to our strategist. I'm jumping back to my view controller to save it. I'm jumping to my move to save it. But I want you guys to jump to your view controller. And this is going to be step number 4, add code to process the move. Now, as you all saw, I can't look and type and talk at the same time. Last year I used an auto typer and I killed it. People hated it. So this year I'm typing, and I'm not a sadist, and I didn't want to type out all this stuff. And I'm sure you didn't want to type it out either. But it doesn't mean we don't need to know what we're doing here. So I'm going to have you guys take the comments out. Don't forget the one at the bottom. And I'm just going to explain exactly what we're doing here. So the human made their turn. The AI makes their turn. Well, the AI needs to make their turn. The first thing we want to happen is we don't want the human player to be able to tap on the screen and confuse the AI while it's trying to process the turn. So the first thing we're doing is we're disabling all the buttons. It's UIKit. Each one of those rows or columns is its own individual button. So we want to disable that while the AI is processing its move. We also do not want to process this move on the main thread. So we're pulling it to a background thread. We're then calling the strategist's best move for AI, which don't click on your stuff, I'm just doing it here. We'll be adding code to that later to determine what the best move is, so that's what's happening there. It will process the best move, and it will add this wait time for the delay, because hey, computers are fast. Even though I said, you know, it takes time to process the moves, it's going to process them like that. And if you're a human player and you're playing this game and you make your move and it makes its move right away, it takes out that enjoyment of playing the game. You kind of want to build in a little bit of wait time. So I'm just doing that. I'm adding a little wait time. I'm doing some math, and then I'm making the move. And this is just another, if I scroll down here, essentially what this is doing is it's going through, and there's some fancy code behind here that takes an image that I drew up, and it's just a UI image. It drops it in whatever column based on some math. It does use the value to determine what row, what column. I always do that backwards. So that is what is happening there. Now, the next thing we want to do is we need to process the AI move. So let's head over to the isWin, which is going to be in the board Swift file. That's going to be number 8 on your jump bar. Once again, I am not typing in all that code, and you do not need to type in all that code either. Just remove the 2 comments. But just like before, we can't just skip it. We need to go over it a little bit. So what's happening here is it's saying, all right, go ahead and see if the stones match. The AI is going to make the move. It's going to check. There's another function that runs, which I won't show you because it's a little dicey. Again, take a look at it on your own time. It's going to run. It's going to check it out. It's going to make the move. It's going to drop in the stones. It's going to determine if they match. If they match, it'll move on to the next one until it gets to all 4 to determine if there's a win. If there's a win, you're going to eventually get that isWin, and you're going to be notified, and you're going to lose to an AI. So the next thing we have to do, and this we are also not going to type. I promise the one after this we will type again, so don't get used to this not typing stuff. There was just a lot of code here. So head down to the game model updates, which is right underneath this one. Take out those 2 comments, or the comment things, whatever you want to call them. Now this is where we actually determine our isWin. So with a game like Connections, you can't use a value to determine like this move is more valuable than that move. It's more like I either won or I lost. So that it goes back to what I was saying earlier about you have to know the rules of your game. And you will really need to think that through before you start laying down any lines of code, or you will rip your hair out and look like my husband. He doesn't have any hair. So here what we're doing is we're getting our player. We're checking to see if it's a win for the opponent. If it is, then we switch players. If, we then go through, we gather up our moves that can move, checks to see if we can put a stone in that slot, or if the slot's already filled up, because I think you can have like 7. It then generates those moves and it sends them back. Because remember, the game model updates, it took me a while to figure this out myself. GameplayKit is kind of new still. I mean, it's only like a couple years. The game model updates, it's not an update. Get that out of your head. It's a move. All right, I personally think it's bad naming, but that's what it is, and that's how you have to understand it. It is, the way that they explain it is that you've got the board, you've got the copy. That's the model based on these updates of the moves. I don't understand why they do it, but once you get it in your head that those are the moves, those are the available moves that your AI can choose from, that's what you want to work on. And here we're just saying, hey, if it's a win, switch it over. Otherwise, get me all these moves I can get and pass them through, and then I will choose as the AI what is the best move to make. So the next step is going to be down in the apply. And let me jump this up for you guys. There we go. And in this, congratulations, we get to type again. We get to be like real programmers. Here what we're doing is we're saying, all right, let's get our move. So let's go ahead and do that. If let move equals game model update as a move. We want to make sure it's a move. We've got to be somewhat safe when we're working on this stuff. We don't want to have our thing explode. So if you went out, you've gotten a move, looks like a good move, let's go ahead and add the stone. So we'll do add stone. And our stone color, which is represented by that enum, is just going to be whatever the current player is, because it is assumed that whoever is running this apply function and the game model updates, it's the current player on the board. So that's what we're going to do. It's current player, and we need to know that stone for that current player. And this is where we say, well, where does it go? And in what column does it go? Well, it goes into the move dot column. Once we added our stone, we then take our current player variable and we modify it to the current player dot opponent. And this is how we transfer the move back to the opponent. Now the score, this is a very, 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 did I say very? Simple heuristic. And I did it this way because I wanted you to play with this particular function in the lab. So very simply, we just want to say, okay, look, if this move for the current player, whether it's the human player or the AI player, well, in this case, it would be the AI player. If this move that I'm about to make will result in a win, like a true win, like four in a row win, then give me 500 for my score. If, however, I'm going to lose if I make that win, then give me negative 500, because that would be a bad move. If, however, none of those things happen, they will not win, they will not lose, then just give me a score of 0. And you will see that when you go and you play this game, it's good, it works. You can have a decent game, but you can have a so much better game if you were to just deal with, you know, adding a cool heuristic, which I promise you'll get to do in the lab. So let's take our score function and let's add the code that I just told you about. And that will be if let player. We want to make sure that we actually have a player, and that player is indeed of the player class. Let's check to see. I want to make sure everyone in the back can see. That's why I keep doing that. If is when for player, then let's return 500. If, however, when that's going to be else if, it's not, if it's is when, see, I lost my auto typing. I hate when that happens. Makes me have to think. The truth comes out, I can't type. You're going to get an error. Just, if you're good at yeah, I know what it is. I'm going to go back and fix it. But just type out what I have, and then we'll go back up to, actually, let's just fix it now. Up in your score, you have to actually tell it that it's for player. Otherwise, it doesn't know what a player is. So go back up to the top and do that, and then you'll be able to use your auto typing, and you won't look so terrible like I did trying to type. So we're going to do return negative 500. Otherwise, we're going to return 0. Raise your hand if you're there. God, you guys are better than I am. Come up here and teach this thing. All right, so now we've got our score. We've got exactly what I mentioned before. Now we need to put the strategist to use. For that, we're going to go back to the strategist class. I'm going to save these things real fast. So go to strategist.swift. Scroll up to the top, right after where we return, or just before we return to strategist, rather. We're going to do strategist.maxLookAhead. Depth is going to be 7. Now, if you don't want to put in 7, if you want to put in a different number, you can. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to be able to play with this number in the lab. So whatever you want to put in is fine. I'm going to put in 7 right now. This, again, this tells the strategist, hey, look, when I'm playing against this human opponent, I want to see the future. I want to see it this many times. They make a move, I make a move. Let's do this 7 times so I can evaluate the best move over a long period of time. This number is more important than you may think. It's not really just a matter of looking into the future. It's a matter of, are you playing for the long game or not? If you're looking for a quick win, you don't need to look ahead in the future that far. If you're playing for the long game, you absolutely do need to look into the future to see what you think your opponent is going to do. So let's go ahead and build and run. Did I miss out step 3? Oh, I did. Oh my goodness. I gotta tell you, in practice, this worked really well, but I think doing the room hosting kind of put me on a mental case here. Step 3, huh? Oh, the one I was talking about so much before. There we go. My apologies. Thank you, Caroline. All right, so in the best move for AI, wait a second. You guys probably already got there before me. I can't find it on here. I'm going to have to bring it up on the side. That? There we go. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to do a copy and paste. Terrible instructory. All right, so this is what we want to do for this. Thank you, Caroline, very much. Here what we're doing is we're doing the move. We're going to say the strategist needs to go get the best move for the current player off the board. Once it determines the best move, it's going to return the column from that move. So when everybody has that, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand. And now we can build and run. And now we can actually play against an AI. That's so much better. Let's see if we can beat him. Huh. He's being a little jerk. So that is pretty much the AI in a nutshell. My apologies for running a little weird on that one, but listen, you're going to do the lab, and normally we jump right into the lab, but before we do, there are a couple of things I just want to go over. Let me just get my keynote back up real quick. Okay, so we talked about the random source. What you're going, don't worry, don't think you're going to have to type the code from this little slide up here. This is more of a, I should scare you and say, yeah, type it just like that. No, this is actually in your lab documentation. You'll be able to review it and go through it. I just wanted to go over it with you quickly. What we're doing here with the random source is, as I said, you can get your AI to be more human-like. I mean, I don't know your name, but if I were to play a game with you, you're not perfect like me. But seriously, if I were to play a game with you, you're only human. You're going to have really good moves in front of you and really bad moves in front of you. It would be impossible as a human to always, always, always pick the best move possible all the time. And let's say you have 10 best move possible to make, right? If you want your AI to always perform the same way and always perform the same one, or select the same one from those same 10 moves, don't set a random source, because that won't happen. But if you want him to be a little more human, and he's got 10 moves in front of him to choose from, give him a random source. And when you're choosing a random source for him to use, what you want to do is either choose the linear congruent, I'm not going to try and pronounce these. You can choose one of these three. You can have something that is faster, which is the linear congruational. It's faster, but it's less random. Okay, so if you're looking for speed in your game, that's a good one. But if you're going to sacrifice some gameplay and some randomization. If you're looking for something a little in the middle, you're going to use the ARC4 random source, which is similar to the one you all know from not GameplayKit. Okay? Your other one, I'm going to say this one right, the Mersenne Twister, did I get it? Random source. This one is slower. It will take more time to choose a random number, but it will be more random. And you have to understand, too, with randomizations in computers, there's no such thing as a truly random number. These are all pseudo-random numbers. Very important. Also, when you're talking about randomization, there's a seed value in GameplayKit with randomization. So if you have a random source, let's say you have 2 random sources in whatever, and you can use this in apps too. I mean, it doesn't have to just be for games. You can use this to give you a random number for anything, all right? With your random sources, you have a seed value. And you can use that seed value to take 2 different random sources and generate the same results based on those seed values. You can also use a random source here and a random source here in the same app that are completely different. And they will generate different numbers even if you have set the same random source type, if that makes sense. The other thing to think about when you're working with random sources and randomization, and we will not get into this here in this lab or this demo even, is you can set a distribution pattern. And a distribution pattern is basically, you have a couple of different options, and one of those is a uniform option, like you roll a dice, and you have every chance, the same chance of rolling a 1 that you would when you roll a 5, for example, or a 6. So you've got that, it's uniform distribution. You have, and I can't pronounce this one, it's a you guys probably know how to, Gaussian, it's math stuff. That's the one that goes like this on a curve, right? And you have more probability of hitting a number that's more in the top, in the center here, as opposed to a really low number or a really high number. And something really cool, back to the dice, there's some functions that you can do. They're simplified functions where you can say, give me a dice roll for 6, dice roll for 12, or one that you can set any number of sides. So it's really cool. You won't be using that here, but I encourage you to check it out. So with your best move for AI, that one I missed, you guys will get to go back and play with that. The one that we put in there is the standard one where we just choose a best move from a number of moves that we get back, a random number of moves that we get back. If you want to lock down how many number of moves you're choosing from, you can use the random move for and then pass in a number of moves to cap it at. So in this particular example, you can't see it, but you'll see it in your lab documentation. I'm passing in the current player, and I'm saying, hey, cap my random number of moves at 5, and choose a random move from that 5. Now, earlier I said, well, you don't have to set a random source. So let's say you set up your min-max strategist, because he doesn't need a random source, and you decided, okay, I'm going to use the random move. Well, guess what? It won't work. Because, it'll work, but it'll work as if you were using the other just best move. And the reason is because this random move function uses that random source as its basis for generating the random moves. Does that make sense? And you'll play with that. You'll be modifying it and checking out more randomization. You're also going to mess with the heuristics. And this is where it gets really, really fun. And I hope you... So the lab is designed like a lab for a mad scientist. You can blast through this lab in 5 minutes and go out forth and go do stuff that's not here, which would be boring. Or you can play with these values, adjust them, test them, see how they change things. And in this one, this is where you can really play with it. So here, what we're doing is we're going to count the number of stones matched. And the code is simplified here. In your lab, it's a whole lot longer. So basically, it's going to say, hey, look, let's go out. Right now, we're doing 500 for a win, negative 500 for a loss, 0 for a draw. This heuristic will go out and say, hey, look, let's go through and see how many the red guys got. 1, 2, 3, 4 is a win, so we don't really care. How many the black guys got? 1, 2, 3, 4 in this direction, that direction, this direction, both of these directions, and it will start to add them up. So if I've got 1, I get it's not a point, but I get a point. If I got 2, I get 2 points. If I got 3, I got 1, 2, 3 points. So it starts to build it up, and then it adds all of these things, and it will make a really cool choice based on who has more colors on the board and more connections or possible connections on the board. So really play with that. I encourage you to do that. And then you have to go back through and pass in that new ability for checking the score. So with that, if you have any questions before we jump into the lab, we've got 18 minutes in this session still. We'll do like maybe 3 minutes for the conclusion and the wrap up. So we have plenty of time for questions now. And of course, when you're working on the lab, I'll be here for questions. And that's it for now for the lab. But is there any questions?
Do you know of any similar kits that compile on Linux?
I'm sorry, what's that?
So like for instance, GameplayKit compiles on iOS and macOS. Do you know of anything that compiles similarly on Linux?
Oh, see, I'd have to ask my husband for that one. No, he's a Linux guy. I'm sorry, I don't. Does anybody know? Okay. Sorry. Any other questions?
I know this is called GameplayKit.
Yes.
Have you ever used like this framework to do non-game?
Yes, actually, randomization is great for that because again, even though I'm applying it here to a game to get random moves and determine what random moves, it is really good. Let's say, I'm drawing a blank right now, but the short answer is yes. I mean, think of an app where you need some type of random number to come back to you. This is perfect. Can you use pathfinding? No, not really. I don't know what you would use it for. Entities and components? I don't really think you can use it outside of a game. But definitely randomization. Because we do have time. I mean, let me just back up real quick. I went too far. Let me just pull all these out here. So this is pretty much the core set of the GameplayKit stuff. Your randomization, absolutely you can use it in an app, right? The state machines, you can use them in an app. Think about this for a second, right? So I know we didn't cover state machines at all, and I hope Ray doesn't kill me because I'm so going off topic right now. But I'm answering her questions, so. The state machines will allow you to take all of this procedural code that you might do, the if statements. You remember back in the day where you have to go, if this condition is met, do this. If this condition is met, do this. If this condition is met, then do this. With state machines, you don't have to do that anymore. You basically turn your state on or off based on that condition, and it keeps your code nice and clean. So you're saying, like, if my state is in a playing state, or in whatever your app might be, if my state is in this state, all of these conditions are probably met, so please run this code. But if I'm in this state, please run this code. So yeah, you could definitely use that in something else. Entities and components, no. Min-max strategist, I guess there are things you could do that with in an app. You'd have to be like, there's no reason why you can't. I mean, it's artificial intelligence. You'd have to tie it to be a move of some sort. You'd have to be able to create it as an identifiable move. That would be a serious challenge. If you come up with something, you gotta hit me up on Twitter, because that'd be interesting. What? Stock purchases, yeah, there you go. And pathfinding, rule systems, agents, goals, and behaviors, not really. I mean, rule systems is about, probably not. All right, so if there's no other questions, I would strongly encourage you to jump into the lab. And I'll be here if you have questions. But really, play with those values, because, and I've got, in the lab, you'll be putting in all those random sources, and you'll be able to switch between the random sources as you mess around with the lab. So the way that I'm talking through the lab, please, I want you to work on the lab while I'm talking. When you're setting your random sources, I try to set it up easily that you can create all 4 of those random sources and then set the random source on the strategist. Maybe play a game or 2, see how it goes, go back, choose another source, play some more games, go back, and then go back and set the heuristics, and then also the actual selection of the random move. And yeah, you'll see there's build and run steps in the lab. There's places where I encourage you to do the build and run. But you definitely want to set the random source before choosing the random move. See how the random source works with the best move? Oh, yay, we're finally there. You guys have about 10 minutes for the lab. Okay, so we are done with the lab. I'm going to be in the room across the way after this session and during the next session. But let's see what we learned in this session, shall we? We learned how to use GameplayKit, and we learned a little bit about the key components of GameplayKit, specifically related to the AI stuff. We also learned a little bit more about the strategist. I really like the strategist. Finally, hopefully some of you got to at least play a little bit around with the lab. And again, if you didn't, really go through, mess around with those settings, make your hair all crazy like mine, and get yourself a beaker, and be a mad scientist. Don't wear a hat, because this is trademarked. All right, so where do we go from here? Well, that's a very good question. No surprise, right? We're going to go to the site and check out all the tutorials on the site. Specifically the one by Ryan Ackerman, where he really, really goes into artificial intelligence. I promise you, it's not my favorite because it's zombies, but it is my favorite currently right now on the site. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. You can also, and again, I encourage you to do this, RTFM, go to Apple's website and read their GameplayKit programming guide. There's a lot of information in there. Read it word for word, every single line. And then come back and tell me what it says. If you have any questions or you just want to shout out to me on Twitter, you can find me. I'm at Paradox927. That was the name I had since like day 1. I don't even know how I came up with it, which is a lie. If you want to know, come find me. I'll tell you. See this guy? I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name because I will butcher it. But his first name is Morton, and he's somewhere around here in the conference. He was the tech editor for this particular session, as well as a number of other sessions I don't even know about. He's the guy that we can thank for everything that went perfectly fine here. I'm the guy who you can thank for things that went wrong. That's not true. Blame him. He's the tech editor. But all kidding aside, he's the one that really made this, and all of the other tech editors and the content lead who made this conference fantastic. Now, before I wrap up, I am done as room host in this room. This is the last time you will ever hear me speak at RWDevCon 2017. I want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Understand that I am extremely out of my comfort zone, and if I can do it, there's absolutely no reason you can't do it. So find a way to get out of your comfort zone, grow a little bit, and then let me know on Twitter how you did. Thank you.